are taken, which provoke further extreme responses in an opposite direction. Now, a good illustration of this is what's happening with the abortion situation. This week, you may have heard that Alabama and I believe it was Missouri, along with a number of other states, 13 I think in all, have passed what many consider to be draconian laws restricting abortions and access to abortions. This very extreme response, particularly the one in Alabama, seems to be the most extreme because it does not include abortions, availability of abortions to women impregnated through incest or rape, and even fervent supporters of abortion bills, for fervent, what do they call them, pro-choice people, have always agreed that abortions should be available to those people who suffer, attacks. But this is apparently a rather naked and blatant attempt to get a Supreme Court case going, because apparently many pro-choice and extreme pro-choice supporters seem to think that because of the current makeup of the Supreme Court, they now have a chance to overturn Roe versus Wade, something they've wanted to do for a very long time, something they see as a real signal of the decline in our civilization, and something they very much want to get rid of. And this, of course, has sparked an equal and opposite extreme response for those who are supporters of abortion or women's rights to have abortions. And so we have a situation based on fear and manipulation, and the fear response is exactly what we're getting here. Another great illustration of that is what's going on in the world, and how the world perceives us and our foreign policy under President Trump, and the pullback, the fear that it engenders. And there's a wonderful, again, Washington Post article, this one by Fareed Zakaria, that talks about that pretty succinctly. And Trump's ambivalence towards foreign policy, and what certainly will ultimately, if not already, be seen as foreign policy blunders, beginning with early in his presidency and his relationship with North Korea and Kim Jong-un, how he was sort of excited and motivated by the possibility that he could be the president who made a peacemaking deal with North Korea, and could have a wonderful relationship with their leader. And that just didn't happen, and that became evaporated, and he's now moved on. Now we're in the middle of sort of well, a crisis of our own making, or our leaders' own making. We now have abandoned, in many ways, any Middle East policy whatsoever, and have handed it over to Saudi Arabia and Israel, who have a very succinct goal and point of view that it does not lend itself to mediation, but subjugation, if you will. We have supported some regimes in Latin America, including Venezuela, to our detriment, as generally happens when we do these sorts of things. And we have people in charge of our national security and international relations, like John Bolton, who are very pro regime change, and see us as the sort of sword that is needed to, come into these countries and divest them of what they believe to be not good governments, and try to replace them with governments they agree with. And then, of course, there's immigration. So this is, again, a policy that's haphazard and mostly reactionary, based on fear. And what it's done is to trigger a reactionary response across the world, where a lot of countries are pulling back into this fear, into nationalism, rather than an understanding of our interconnectedness. I would say that it's not a lack of understanding of that, it's a fear of that. I think the understanding is there, but there's a pull back against it. It's a frightening concept for some, that we are all connected, because it means that we have to change our perspective on things. And that is a difficult pill for some people to swallow. One example of this is what's going on with China and the tariff situation and the trade demands. It's become quite aggressive. And so we have China saying, we're going to fight back, which is, an understandable response to a very heavy-handed approach. I certainly believe that many people would have the same. Then we have the situation in Iran, where we had a understanding and agreement that we, the United States, had agreed to with many other countries, which would help Iran to de-escalate and get rid of any development plans they have of nuclear technology. Well, now we pulled out of that, even though the agreement was being abided by, and Iran was actually quite satisfied, as were, the rest of Europe. Now, all of a sudden, there's a provocation going on in which Iran is basically saying, well, if you're going to renege on this deal, then we're going to start, recalling our nuclear program. Here we are. So, confidence and the fear response, if you will, is a pattern that's going on in many different countries. Canada, looking at these statistics here, it's saying that confidence in the U.S. president in Canada went from 76% under Barack Obama to 25% in 2018. And in France, it went from 83% under Barack to single digits under Trump. In this report, which is done by the Pew Research Organization, 25 countries, only 2 places expressed greater confidence in Trump than its predecessor. And are you ready for what those 2 countries are? Israel and Russia. One could have guessed. And so countries are becoming more assertive and more anti-American. And this is for a number of different reasons. There are those who embrace Trump, and they're kind of following his lead on the one hand. And there are those that don't and feel the need to be prepared to fight him. So, here we are, experiencing the fear response, not just nationally, but globally. While at the same time, amazing things are happening in the world that are moving us forward. What are those things, you're asking? Well, among them is the declining rate of deaths and diseases across the world. Even though this fear seems to be on the rise, our technical innovation is pushing us forward. But if you look at the overall trends, comparing them, and by overall, he's talking about going back over a century or two. What we are experiencing is much more peaceful and much more serene than what we experienced 100 or 200 years ago. And it's a call to awaken many people from this stupor of pessimism that has slowly taken over. Because when we have a worldview that is based on journalism In other words, the media, whatever